So just to quickly recap the point that we're at. So according to Tosfos, what does Tosfos say? What does Tosfos say? You should know now what Tosfos says. Point being is that the idea that we had last time was that there's an idea of that every Megillah, no matter what language it's in, you can do a Maisa Kriya on the Megillah. Okay, it's considered a Maisa Kriya, no matter what language is written in, right? But only one of them is a Chefsa Shal Pirsum. Only the Megillah written Ashuris has the status of Chefsa Shal Pirsum, and that's why it could work even in the environment where people don't understand Ashuris. Only that Megillah can function as Pirsum. Okay, that's all you need to know to get into the Ran. Who's reading? Yeah, it's been a while. All right, so the Ran's on the Dapei Arif Dal on Beis and Megillah. The Ran starts with Aval Kornasal Loazos Belaz. Go.
Aval Kornasal Loazos Belaz. You could read it for foreigners in a foreign language. Perish Rashi. Zal Shiyadua Lashon Achar. Change the Lashon Kodesh. They know another language which isn't Lashon.
So that's what he's defining as. We know this already. What's Laz? Laz means they know a language other than Hebrew. All right, or Lashon HaKodesh. We'll call it Hebrew for now. Okay.
The sphere like Shafi she Yodin Lashon HaKodesh, even though they do know Lashon HaKodesh, even through Yodei Laz, since he also knows a foreign language. He's also Yotzei.
All right, so we're talking about someone who is bilingual, right? If someone's bilingual in Hebrew and another language, let's say we'll use Russian just to make it easy for the time being. If someone knows both languages, so he has the right to do what?
Go to each one.
Either one. Right. You know, if there's a Russian shul on the block and next door is a Hebrew shul, he can go to either one, right?
It has to be written in the shurs though.
The one is but it's in Russian. So he can avail himself of either the Russian one or the Hebrew one. He has the right to do each one.
Is this necessarily mashma from Rashi?
Obviously it is, because we see...
No, the Ashuris. He still uses Ashuris.
Right, that's what he means. He means, in other words, you can't... When we say you can write a Megillah in every other language, okay, we're not saying that you can actually write it in Spanish. Right, it's always in the Hebrew script. Always think about Yiddish. Yiddish is always the best example, because Yiddish is written in Ashuris. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but I mean, Yiddish is in Ashuris. If you look at the script of Yiddish, right, this script looks like this type of script, okay? Doesn't mean you can actually write it in Spanish itself. The script must always be Ashuris. So there's a limitation. So don't go nuts when we say that you can write in any language, write and then have it read in any language. It's not like a blanket thing. There's a limitation. And now he goes further, okay? But the Ramban's building a case, okay? Keep going.
Even the one who holds that Sfarim can be written in any language.
Even he has that limitation. Right, because what's the ultimate objective?
Right, the ultimate to read in Lashon Kodesh.
Yeah, in other words, even though we have an idea that you can read Megillah in other languages, right? Ultimately, what's it tied to?
Sure.
Right. In other words, we're not saying that a person has to abandon the notion of Hebrew being somehow superior. Ultimately, it has to attach itself back to that. It's got to relate back to the Ksiva, the Megillah and Ashuris. Okay.
Did we get as far why I asked me in Ashuris? Loazos hanosh ein yodeim Lashon Kodesh. Therefore, must be when it says foreigners means they don't know Lashon Kodesh.
Right.
Kadmin Hasam hanu leuzi dasu lekamei deraba v'uki rav metargum b'nei.
You guys are going to hit this Amako soon, but what's that halacha?
There was the
what's that halacha apply to?
There were certain people who didn't understand.
What's halacha be'edus?
Oh, you have to. The Sanhedrin has to actually hear from the word.
Right, and what happens if they speak a foreign language?
So you can't have something. That's why the Sanhedrin needs to know so many languages.
Exactly, because you can't.
Right.
So what does that show you?
Because Rava had a translator between them, and then it answers because Rava said he didn't know how to answer, but he knows.
Good, exactly. Okay. So again, what point is it proving?
That they must. When it said Loaz, it must mean not. They didn't know Hebrew, so we're spoken Hebrew.
Correct.
That's okay. I'm saying that's just because that was relevant over there.
Well, he wants to show you that laws always means what? Single language, not bilingual.
There couldn't mean Hebrew.
Doesn't matter. But don't worry about Arias yet. I'm saying that's what his point is that laws means I only know Russian. Okay. With all that said. Those right. So even though they don't know Ashuris, but they're still Yotzei, right? Now comes this key line, but Koshi Yitiru.
They only did it with difficulty.
That's a big problem. But Koshi Yitiru. We don't like that. Pinsky, why don't we like that?
Because
Koshi Yitiru means like...
It doesn't seem like a
right, it's worse. It sounds like their hands were tied. What kind of thing is that? What?
They're forced into it.
Well, that's Tamir's picking up on the irony of the whole thing, which is that, well, whose fault is that?
Otherwise they won't be Yosei.
Whose fault is it that it's Bakoshi Yitiru?
Well, the Chazal were allowed this to.
Why?
Bingo. Who created this? Who created this?
Why would they put them?
Who created this? Chas v'shalom. Who created this monster? Chazal did, right? Chazal created the monster.
Why?
And
Why what?
they created Megillah. So the Ramban's saying they created Megillah, but now they're stuck.
Megilla, yeah.
But now they're stuck.
Right.
They're like they created a Frankenstein. That's what he's saying. Bekoshi Tiru.
Frankenstein's monster.
No.
We don't like Bekoshi Tiru. You want Hitiru, right? You don't want Bekoshi Tiru. Bekoshi Tiru means that there was something conceptually very troublesome about this possibility. So you have to answer that. What does it mean? Why is he? He must have a completely different way of looking at the way Kriyas Megillah was structured. Well, not completely, but it's a big modification about what we said before. All right, so go on.
Shem the Ika mitzvahs kriya. There is a mitzvah kriya.
Right.
And the Chacham, the Psuminisa be a diamamish adif tvei. The Psuminisa is much better if they actually know it.
Right. And that kind of makes sense, right? In other words, if you're gonna create this mitzvah, right? How should it be structured? Where many people know about it.
Right.
Okay. But doesn't that seem to be
Why
like
is that
a
fearsome, though?
first reason he's giving, just factually, the first reason he's giving is saying that they want to ensure that people will know the story.
Oh, but they're too dingy, right?
But one second, but
It's not the story.
why
It's
can't you?
established that-
Why is the Ramban so bothered by this? I mean, this sounds like a very noble thing. Does one Chazal want this? Don't you want it to be understood by everybody, as many people as possible? I mean, why? In other words,
No.
And they want to be able to the language. They know.
right.
But oh, they should
Oh, one second. Don't go so fast. What's the problem with that? Before you get to what the second reason is, what's the problem? The second reason, Ve'od. Well, what was wrong with the first reason? Doesn't that seem to be a good enough imperative?
No.
No? No, stop it. You know that because of the Ramban's saying, but that seems to be a very logical reason. What do you need a second reason for? Right? What's the second reason? And the second reason stinks compared to the first one. Keep going. Arya, he hasn't even read it yet. Read it first and I'll address what Arya just said. Okay? Alright, but so Arya wants to say the fact that the other reason is to make sure the individual can read for himself. But one second, but we know one thing for sure. How is Megillah set up in its ideal format?
That should be done in a congregation.
B'tzibur, right? Give me proof. We discussed it last time.
Yom Knesset first.
What? No. Well, that's kind of a proof, but a better proof in the Kriya itself. Like, what do we do in the Kriya? And there's certain things we do in the Kriya.
Oh, you don't fold it up unless.
Right, it's post-shade in front of the whole tzibur, Aseres b'nei Haman with one neshima, all those things, there's certain ideas that only apply to tzibur. What? Okay, so, but that's what I want to know. In other words, the second reason seems a lot weaker than the first. The first should include the second reason. If you're maximizing Pirsum, why would you distinguish between the tzibur and the yachid? Okay? Alright, keep going.
We're going.
Oh.
Someone actually knows Hebrew. You should never.
So that's his key line. So what's the key? The key line is that if I'm bilingual, I know Russian and I know Hebrew, right? So according to Ramban, I can only once I know Hebrew as well, I can't choose the Russian synagogue over the Russian Kriya over the Hebrew Kriya. I must use the Hebrew Kriya. So why?
Raya.
Question is it l'chachila b'diavad? In other words, let's say a guy only speaks Russian, okay? So should the guy who speaks Russian only, where should he go, according to Ramban? Where should he go? What would you say?
Not Russian place.
Should he?
No.
No.
Let's do a code.
Yeah,
Should he?
No, he should go to Lashon Kodesh.
Should it? Well, it's unclear according to Ramban where he should go.
Alright.
It's about Chalukes. What are the two reasons? What's the Ramban's shita? The Ramban has a slightly different, I think, a slightly different formulation in how Kriyas Megillah, how Chazal formulate Kriyas Megillah. The Ramban holds that Rashi holds that if I'm bilingual, I can make use of Hebrew or Russian, right? Whereas the Ramban holds that no, if I know both, I can only use Hebrew. Why should that be the case? Why should that be the case? And what's the idea of Bakoshi Atiru? What do you say? Guys, the right way to approach this is the real way to approach this is to use Rashi because we kind of defined Rashi's position last time. If you think about what we said last time, Rashi's position is out there. That's already out there.
What's Rashi's position?
Rashi holds that it doesn't matter if you know if you're bilingual, you can avail yourself of either one. So what must Rashi hold?
Rashi says it's fine to go to either or.
Okay, that's factually what he holds. But what must he hold conceptually?
Rashi holds that.
So Rashi's saying that in the original, and this is the key thing, in the original formulation of Chazal, when they formulated this very mitzvah, so what did they do? So they said, they had there's one overall objective, which is Pirsum. Now there's two paths to get there. Okay, one of them is Maisa Kriya. And when it comes to Maisa Kriya, does it matter what language it's in?
Not really.
No. No. Every language equally produces the Pearson. All right? What?
Just a means to an end.
A means to an end. Right, it's a means to an end. But the other method is that they said that the Megillah of Ashuris is a chafsa shel Pearson, meaning that in this, not the Maisa of Kriya, not in the action of reading, but in the very document itself, and this, the way this Megillah is written, its style is part of the Pearson. Its style of writing, the language, all that stuff is part of the very system of Pearson itself. But that can only emerge in what? It has nothing to do with the Maisa Kriya. It has to do with this, the Megillah Ashuris, right? It's in that Megillah. That's the chefsa shel Pearson. Okay? But according to Rashi, in the Maisa Kriya, there's no difference whatsoever. You understand? According to Rashi, in the Maisa Kriya, there's no difference between Ashuris versus Spanish. There's no difference in the Maisa Kriya. It's just a question of which one can also function as a chefsa shel Pearson. You understand? Only Ashuris can function as a chefsa shel Pearson. And that's why it works, even if people don't understand it. Okay? Just like Ner Chanukah is a vehicle Pearson, right? Does that mean every person who walks by says, hey, look at that candle. Wow, I'm thinking about the war? No. But that's the objective. So too... No. I speak Russian. Listen. If I speak Russian and I go and I attend a Hebrew reading, and I don't understand a single word of it, I'm just as Yotze and just as Mefarsim-ish as if I heard it in Russian also. All right? Now, do we prefer it?
So how?
Because in the case of Ashur, it's a chefsa shel Pearson, right? And therefore, I'll be in an environment where I'll ask about the story, and if I go hear it in Russian, I hear it in the language I understand. They're both avenues of Pearson. They're both avenues.
And therefore, even
Proof is that's why Rashi says it doesn't matter if I'm bilingual, because insofar as the Maisa Kriya is concerned, there's no difference. There's no difference between what.
As far as Maisa Pearson.
That's attached to that objective. I'm saying the Maisa Kriya of Hebrew, if I understand Hebrew and I understand Spanish, insofar as the Maisa Kriya is concerned, you can't say there's a difference. They both equally arrive in Pearson. What?
They're both equal Pearson.
Correct. How do you know? One second. How do you know it must be a Maisa Kriya and not just?
You want to mail back bracha?
Okay, give me the better proof because it's written on
Cloth
with do. It starts to be written like cloth. If you understand Rashi, the Ramban becomes, I think, somewhat clear. Well, what's the Ramban? Hold on, slowly. What's the Ramban going to have to say? Because the Ramban obviously is talking about, the Ramban's going into the original formulation. That's what you have to, in order to answer the Ramban's position, you have to go into how they formulated it. Rashi's saying the way they formulated it was, they saw two equal avenues to Pearson. They said either it's going to be through the Maisa Kriya, which can be done in any language, or it's through the chefsa shel Pearson, which only exists by Ashuris. All right, because that's the most authentic version of Megillah. So what's the Ramban going to respond to that?
He's only saying that.
Well, so before we get to the Koshi Tiru, but let's go slowly. So what Avi's saying, I think, is the right track. In other words, what were Chazal facing here? So Rashi says in the initial construct of Megillah, they created two equal avenues to Pearson. The Ramban's not saying that. The Ramban's saying that there was only one. They were kovea a Maisa Kriya of this ksav. In other words, the Maisa Kriya, there's only one Maisa Kriya of Kriyas Megillah, according to them, at the initial stages. And what's that? Ashuris. It wasn't that they said, okay, well, we're seeing two different avenues. What they said was that they said this Megillah, and only this Megillah, is the one that you can do a Maisa Kriya.
They thought 99% more.
So if that's how they were kovei it, so how are you in another language?
Back into their corner. They can't make something that no one would be Yotze.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. This is where things get really. But it's their power though. They created it. Let's appreciate first what he's saying. He's not saying that there were two equal methods. He's saying that when they created this mitzvah, so what were they misaking? They weren't misaking a Maisa Kriya and a chefsa shel Pearson. They said that the Maisa Kriya can only be done on this ksav. Only this Megillah. The Megillah written in Hebrew is the only one, at this point, the only one that would register as a Maisa Kriya. Now, conceptually, that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because in the original system, wouldn't you want it to be, you wouldn't want to create like these two avenues. You'd want to say that there was one Maisa Kriya Megillah. Exactly. Chanukah, you don't have options by Chanukah of vehicles of Pearson. It's not like by Chanukah you have, well, there's Ner, and then there's like a book club. That's the other way we can discuss it. We can do Pirsum and
you
Isa.
have candles, so you
No.
to get to the same one.
No, because first of all, olive oil is only mitzvah in a mufkar, right? But you're only yotze by the candle. Why is olive oil makes a nicer candle?
Fit the definition of nair.
Right, it's always one idea of nair, but there's no other avenue of Pirsum other than nair itself.
It's not like you
No,
watch
I'm not saying that there's another.
No, I agree. Rashi was saying in the original construction of the halacha, there always were two avenues to Pirsum. That's different than Ner Chanukah. Ner Chanukah is only one. The Ramban saying what you're saying. The Ramban saying no. If we're going to construct a thing of Pirsum, we can't start having multiple avenues. There's one avenue, Kriyas Megillah. But now what you're saying is correct. But now they're facing a problem. But you understand what? You can start appreciating what he means by Koshi Yitiru now. And the key word, it's not the Koshi, I gave it away. It's that they had to matir something. You see, in Rashi's version,
The conception works anyway.
exactly, it's a natural outgrowth because there's two avenues. According to Rashi, it's not a heter. It's not you have permission now to read it in Spanish. It's naturally part of its formulation. But according to Ramban, it's not part of its formulation. It was only formulated as a Maisa Kriya of this Ksav. That is the Maisa Kriya Megillah. But now you got a big problem. Right. So what's the Ramban's solution? All right. The Ramban's saying that Bekoshi Tira means that he had to matir it. Chazal to matir it. This wasn't the ideal. They had to matir it. Because the problem's like this. The problem is that if the objective is Pirsum, right? Let's go in order of his steps. He says if the objective is Pirsum, if that's the objective, then the Chazal are facing a big problem. Because we want to say the Maisa Kriya can only be done on this Ksav. But the problem is, if the objective of the very mitzvah itself isn't met, then we got a big problem. Okay, so what do they have to do? They had to allow it to be read in other languages because of Pirsum and Isa. In other words, it's a funny idea. The Ramban's right, but it's a funny idea. The Ramban's saying that the halacha can only convey one avenue of Pirsum as its ideal. But the problem is that if the objective of the halacha is Pirsum, and this thing by definition, it's not like Ner, which can be universal. This thing by definition will not work for a very large percentage of the they can't tolerate such a thing. It goes against the very nature of the takana. But now,
you make the stuff and say they didn't formulate it that way.
Again, let's just make it a little clearer. Because I want to answer the Ramban's second reason, but let's take a step back. In other words, the question's like this. If you want to isolate the question, was it part of the construct to have two avenues of Pirsum? Or was this a response to a certain problem that Chazal sensed in their initial formulation? What? So now the Ramban has two reasons, right? The first reason makes perfect sense. The first reason really is the primary reason. What's the first reason? The first reason is that if we don't have, if Pirsum isn't working here, what's the whole point? This thing doesn't make any sense. But the second reason is a beautiful reason. I think I was hinting to it, but it's a beautiful reason. There's another problem. Problems like this. How could they? It's a funny thing, but how could they construct a mitzvah's kriya Megillah that must produce Pirsum? This way. Let's say, according to Ramban, if I speak Russian, okay, we got to go to the primordial, the birth of this mitzvah, okay. If I spoke Russian, so there's two logical possibilities according to Ramban. Is it that I'm simply onus, and therefore I'm patur from the mitzvah? That's one possibility. Or is it that if I spoke Russian at the time that it was only able to be read in Hebrew, at that moment in time, it's possible to say that what? That the chiyuv isn't even chal upon me. Right. It's possible to say as an individual, there is no chiyuv of Megillah. How can it be a chiyuv Megillah if I know by definition I won't be able to understand it? It won't even get off the grounds. Notice the Ramban is saying something profound. The Ramban is saying that it wasn't that when they created this takana to begin with, there's a big problem, which is that you're going to have gavras walking around who by definition aren't chayiv in this mitzvah. It's not, forget these philosophical ideal of Pirsum. As a halachic technicality, it's not that they're Russian speakers who are patur, rather that there's no natural means for them to be even part of the mitzvah itself, because they're Russian speakers. How can it be constructed in such a way? That second reason, the Ramban, is a brilliant reason. He's saying that you would never have. That's what he means when he says that shehu yachal lahosi it's atzmo yidei chavasav yikar la'atzmo. What do we care about the individual? No, that's what he's saying. He's saying that in order for an individual to even be shaykh to the mitzvah of Kriyas Megillah, he must be able to understand something, right? In the way they originally were masaking it as a mitzvah of a kriya of this ksav, well then this guy would not be included in the mitzvah. And that's crazy. Chazal can't create a mitzvah and say it's Chazal, and say that it only applies to a small percentage of the population. That'd be absurd. So not only is it a problem of Pirsum, but what I want to propose is that even the construct of the mitzvah itself, you'd have a significant percentage of the population who the mitzvah won't be shaykh to them. They won't ever get off the ground. They won't be bar chayuva. There won't be people who are chayiv in the mitzvah. You understand? That's the Ramban's second reason. The first reason is really the primary one, because as the objective appears to him, it makes no sense. But the second one equally is valid. He's saying, I'll show you another idea, which is that as a Gavra would never be chayiv in Kriyas Megillah if he only spoke Russian. There'd be no way for him to be chayiv. So therefore, what does he say? That's why they had to allow it to be read in other languages, to compensate for this problem. They had to have such a thing. But they didn't want it. Why is it Koshi Tiru? Because, and this was my point I'm trying to say before, because they're allowing now, the question is, in that second avenue, in the avenue they're creating now, because Ramban's agreeing is another avenue. You can read in other languages. Another avenue exists for Pirsum, right? But that's accommodating people. That's not the ideal, and the ideal should have only been one way. Mitzvahs, Kriyas, Megillah, B'Ksav, Ashuris, and that's it. Ramban now had to say, if I speak both languages, I must avail myself of the one in Hebrew. Why? No, it's the whole point of it being a heter. It's not that Rashi's saying that they're equal. Ramban's saying not equal. Ramban's saying they allowed for this. They allowed for this avenue to be used of. They permitted another avenue to be used. But that's the whole point. Another avenue to be used because you can't avail yourself of the way it was created.
It's not necessarily you're saying it's produced it for everything.
Right. If you're an Ashura speaker, okay, and as far as halacha sees it, there's only one reality in Megillah. It's only the one that the original way it was set up. You're not. Halacha doesn't. My point is this: according to Ramban, there is no bilingual if you speak Hebrew. There's no bilingual.
It's just Hebrew.
It's Hebrew. That's it. You're an Ashura speaker, so there's only one Megillah in your framework. The other Megillas only become a reality in your framework if you only speak that language. If I speak Ashuris also, it's not that I speak Russian and Ashuris. As far as halacha is concerned, you're an Ashura speaker. That's it. There's only one language you speak, and that's Ashuris. So it could be no other way according to Ramban, because that's the way it was originally set up. It was set up in that context. But according to Rashi says no. Rashi says there are two parallel avenues that both achieve the objective. So what I'm saying, so I'm just trying to show you the machlokus is not a wide machlokus. It's actually very. There's one easy point they're arguing on. That's why it sounds like they're far apart, but they're not. The point of contention is when Chazal are misaking this, did they misaking two equal avenues that both result in the objective of Pirsum, or no? It was actually they only created one primary way. But they realized in creating that primary way, we must they created an accommodating secondary avenue for people to make use of.